Hey, this is Lee Waller, and welcome to Motion Media Design in After Effects. Today I'm going to take a look at recreating this animation right here. This is all based on shape layers and mostly rounded rectangles and their strokes. So let's jump in and rebuild this. First, I'm going to start with a new composition, 1920 by 1080, 24 frames, 10 seconds long on the duration. Hit OK on that. And we're going to start off with shape layer. So I'm going to go up here to rectangle tool, click on it, and then double click. It doesn't matter what the settings are for this. We have created a rectangle in the center of the composition, and we're going to make adjustments to it. The first thing we want to do is, you'll see up here that we have some properties for this rectangle tool. And we have fill, the fill color, the stroke color, and then stroke width. What we want to do is go to the fill, the word fill right there, click on that. And let's select none on the fill. Hit OK. And now we're going to go to stroke, and we do need a stroke on this, and that is how we're going to create all of these shapes. It's just using the stroke of all of these rounded rectangles. We're going to click on solid color, hit OK. And I'm going to go into the stroke color, and I'm going to choose a darker red. And you can choose whatever colors you want to. The two colors that I'm mainly using on this will be a darker red, then a brighter red, and then also white. I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to come down here into the timeline where we have that shape layer. And on that shape layer is our first rectangle, that rectangle one right there. We're going to open up the properties for that, go to rectangle path, and we're going to adjust the size. If you're not familiar with this little chain link right here constrains these two together. So if I click on one of them and drag it down, you'll see that they stay proportioned to each other as we drag them. I'm going to click that off so that they're not constrained together, and I'm going to set this size to 120 by 851. And that gives us a fairly vertical rectangle. We're also going to round this rectangle, these edges here, by using the roundness setting. Let's increase that up to 189. We can click off to the side here, and now you can see the rectangle we've created. It's fairly thin, so we're going to need to increase the width of the stroke itself. To do that, I'm going to close the rectangle path right there so we can see this. Go to stroke right here, open up those properties, and then on the stroke width right there, I'm going to increase that to 59. And now what I want to do is I'm going to create this white line here and the white line just on the outside of our red stroke. I'm going to come back to my composition. I'm going to close the properties for rectangle 1 just so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to duplicate rectangle 1 by selecting it and hitting Control D or Command D. I'm going to go to rectangle 2, open up the properties, and the first thing we want to adjust will be the color of this stroke. So let's go into stroke, go to the color tab right there, and let's make this white. And now we'll decrease the stroke width down to 4 pixels. So you can see we have that white stroke right there, but we're going to need to increase this so that it's on the outside of our red stroke. To do that, we're going to use a modifier that's hidden right over here next to this word add. You'll see this little dropout button, and underneath that will be offset paths. We want to make sure that we apply that to rectangle 2. So make sure that rectangle 2 is selected. Go to add, open that up, and offset paths. You'll see now that we have dropped that under rectangle 2. If for some reason it has dropped underneath both rectangle 1 and 2 right down here, you'll need to delete that and make sure that you just have rectangle 2 selected and that you go through that offset paths, drop that on there, and then it shows up inside the properties of rectangle 2. So we have their offset paths. We're going to open that up, and let's increase that up to 38. I'm going to click off to the side here so we can see what we have. You'll see that now we have the white line on the outside of the red stroke, and now we're going to create one for the inside. That's fairly simple to do. We're just going to go here to rectangle 2, duplicate it, Control D or Command D, And we're going to go in and go to our offset paths right there, and let's decrease that to a -38. And now we have the inside stroke and the outside stroke outlining the red path that we have right there. So I'm going to jump back to the original animation, take a look at it, and you'll see that we have the darker red stroke on bottom and the brighter red stroke on top. And we want to create this brighter red stroke and then animate it. To do that, we already have the darker red stroke ready. So we're just going to duplicate rectangle 1, Control D, Command D, and there's rectangle 4. I'm going to bring that up to the top just to keep things kind of organized. Drop that right above rectangle 3. And we're going to jump in here, and of course we're going to need to change the color. So let's go to stroke 1 and change the color on that. I'm going to click on the color tab there and bring that up to a brighter red. Hit OK on that. Close up stroke 1, and we're going to need to add another modifier to this. So make sure that rectangle 4 is selected right there. Go to Add, open that up, and the modifier we want will be Trim Paths this time. Let's open up Trim Paths, and we'll take a look at what it does. You have a start, an end, and an offset. We're going to animate the start and the end offset, but you can scrub through those and see how they work. This basically takes the path and trims it in the direction that we tell it to go, using the start and the end. So this would be the start position, and we're decreasing the path from the start position. And then we can go to the end position and decrease the path. So we want to animate the start first. Make sure that your timeline indicator is at the very beginning of the timeline. Click the stopwatch next to start. We set that first keyframe at 0%. Let's jump into the animation to 5 seconds. And let's drag that start percentage to 100%. And what we want to do is set our first keyframe for the end position at 5 seconds. So click the stopwatch right there on end. Let's drag that down to 0% and then go to the end of the animation and bring that up to 100%. You can go back now to the beginning of the composition and preview that. And you'll see that we've created a loop in our animation. That'll go to the end of the 10 seconds and just keep on repeating. I'm going to duplicate rectangle 2, which is this outer white stroke that we have. Going to select rectangle 2, Control D or Command D. That creates rectangle 5. I'm going to drag that up to the top. And we're going to jump into the properties for this. We already have offset paths on this, so we're just going to increase that offset paths up to 70. So you see we have the outline now there, and we're going to trim this path so that we end up with just the top part here. So with rectangle 5 selected, let's go to Add, and let's add into that Trim Paths. You'll see now that we have the path there for rectangle 5, the offset path, and now the trim paths. Again, we have our start and our end on this, and we want to set that start at 60% and our end at 40%. And that sets us up for the top there. It's going to be very easy to create the bottom portion of this by duplicating rectangle 5, going into rectangle 6, and we're going to adjust the offset of this trim path. Let's go to 0.0 degrees on the offset property there and type in 180 degrees, and that drops that path down here to the bottom. So we have our top and our bottom on that design element. So we have our top and our bottom on that design element. I'm going to close up rectangle 6. And now take a look at the original animation. We have these 2 lines on the outside with the 4 dots. So we're going to work on creating those. I'm going to duplicate rectangle 6, Command D, Control D. So we're going to open up the properties for rectangle 7, and we're going to make an adjustment on the offset paths and the trim paths together to get this line where we want it. Start off with offset paths real quick and jump into the amount and go to 55 on that. Close up those properties and let's go to trim paths. And we're going to set the start and the end. Let's set the start at 66% and the end at 34%. And then we're going to adjust the offset to 90 degrees. We can easily create the other one by duplicating rectangle 7. Going into the options for that, go to Trim Paths and change that offset to 270 degrees. So now we have our two outside lines there. And to finish this up, we're just going to need to create those 4 dots right there. To do that, I want to make sure that my shape layer 1 there is selected. I'm going to come up here to the rectangle tool, click and hold down on that and go to the ellipse tool. Select the ellipse tool and then double click the ellipse tool. This is just an easy way to get that ellipse started. And of course, we're going to make some adjustments. On this one, we do want a fill. So let's go to the word fill right here. Click on that. Click on solid fill right there. And if your color right there is not white, jump into the color picker there and adjust that to white. We do not need a stroke on this, so click on the word stroke and select none and then hit OK. And now, of course, we're going to need to size this down. To do that, let's come down here into our timeline, open up ellipse 1, go to the path and click off the chain link there so these are not constrained together. And then let's set this to a size of 16 pixels by 16 pixels. You see now that we have our dot right there in the middle. So we're just going to use the position here under ellipse path 1 to drop that into the place that we want it. So I'm just going to drag over. I think we're going to hit about a negative 115. So I'm going to dial that in, negative 115. Now we need to move it up to the top to get this one set. And we're going to click on the y-axis there and type in a negative 350. And that has our first dot set. This process is pretty easy from here on out. We can just go to the ellipse 1, duplicate it, open that up, go to the ellipse path there, and we'll leave it at a negative 115 on the x-axis, and we're going to move it down to a positive 350. So just click on that negative 350 and type in 350, and it drops that second dot down to the bottom here. Close up ellipse 2, duplicate it, go into ellipse 3, and we can go into the path, and on our x-axis, rather than a negative 115, let's type in a positive 115, so just 115. That brings that third dot over here to the right. And by this point, you've probably figured out, we'll duplicate that. Ellipse 3, we now have ellipse 4. Let's go into it. Go to the path setting, go to position, and we'll set this one at 115 by a negative 350. And we have our fourth dot there. So we can take a look at now what we've created. So here's the animation that we've created. You can see that this is just going to repeat on this 10-second cycle. One of the things about creating all of this on the same shape layer is it's easy now to go into the transform properties for that layer and make some adjustments to this element. I'm going to open up, close all of my contents there, go to my transform properties. So if I want this half size, I can go into scale, bring that down to 50%, and then I can also rotate this and change the position of it. So this is a very useful way of creating an element like this and then adding it into other graphics. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out my other tutorials on motion media design with After Effects.